I'm Jeff Moyer. I'm the farm director for the Rodale Institute, which is an organic farm and research and education facility in southeastern Pennsylvania. And I also farm a few hundred acres, well, right now we just upped it to 400 with my son, which is all certified organic, and we raise feed for his 50 cow certified organic dairy. Just to give you an idea of where I'm coming from. I'm going to start in a little bit different spot here than you might suppose. I want to start with this quote from J.I. Rodale. He was the founder of the Rodale Institute. He was not a farmer. He was a businessman, but he bought a farm because he could afford one. And he wanted to raise his family on a farm, and he was always interested in the concept of healthy food. But he wrote this on a blackboard in 1942 when he began to found the Rodale Institute. And of course, you can read it as well as I can, but it says healthy soil equals healthy food equals healthy people. So what J.I. Rodale was really saying is that as farmers, our goal is not to produce food. It's not even to manage the soil. Those are just tools that we use. Our goal as a farmer is to produce healthy people. So everything we do on our farms, everything that I do on my farms, is thinking about that ultimate goal of producing healthy people. So it presents a whole bunch of different challenges for us as farmers that we might not think about ordinarily. But we do work in the soil. These pictures here, and I'm going to show you mostly pictures, not a whole lot of data, for a specific reason. My goal here today, with only a few minutes to talk to you, is not to answer each and everybody's question, because that wouldn't be possible with the data that we have in a short period of time, but really to inspire you to think about what you're doing as a farmer, as a researcher, as an ag professional, differently than what you're currently doing. These pictures here come from some soils from our long-term farming systems trial. That trial's been in place for 32 years now, and side-by-side comparisons of organic and conventional, and that's Dr. Ray Weil from the University of Maryland, and it's an old picture. It's probably 10 years old already. But that picture was taken from soils that were taken out of the ground about 10 feet apart from each other after they had been farmed organically and conventionally. Both growing crops. This one had tillage early on. Towards the end of its cycle, it was no-till. This has always been tilled. This is not from any organic no-till plots. What's really interesting is not only can you see a difference in the picture, in the color of the soil, maybe you can see, if you have good eyes, better than mine, all of the root hairs that are in there, because the plants have different rooting habits. But what's really exciting is when you take those soils and plop them in water. We saw some images earlier today of Pennsylvania soils washing down the Susquehanna River into the Chesapeake Bay. They're not going there because we're farming it. They're going there because of the way we're farming it. Iowa is not washing down the Mississippi River because we're farming Iowa. It's washing down the Mississippi River because of the way we're farming Iowa. We can see clearly that by farming differently, we solidify the soils and change, even with tillage, change the structure of the soil, and that's all being done with cover crops. The big difference between these two systems is cover crops. And again, you can read as well as I can. I tried to make it stand out. It was really hard. Black ink didn't work, red didn't work. Whole lot of reasons to plant cover crops. The biggest reasons that I plant cover crops at the Institute, and what I'm going to talk about mostly this afternoon, is nitrogen and weed management. You get all these other things come with it. But from an organic perspective, where I'm looking at it, I'm trying to manage weeds with cover crops, and I'm trying to supply nitrogen. We don't have a lot of animals. Well, up until 2 years ago, we didn't have a lot of animals on the farm. Now I graze a 65 cow dairy on our farm. So we do have animals and do have some access to manure. But in the past, all of our nitrogen came from legumes. I've been there 38 years, and we've never bought nitrogen. The farm is 333 acres. It's a research station. We just didn't need it. You can get it from the air. As Steve mentioned in his talk, planning is incredibly important. You have to plan your crop rotation so that you can get cover crops in. It's not as simple as just buying seed, throwing it on the ground at the end of the season, and going, now I'm a cover cropper and life is going to be good. It doesn't work that way. It's not that simple. Okay, as an organic farmer, we have very few tools to help us get seeds in the ground. I can't spray. Steve Groff and I agree on about 99% of everything. until we come to the point about tillage. Steve always says, I will never till, I will spray, and I say I will never spray, I will till. Aside from that, we agree on just about everything. This is not my tractor, fortunately. This is not my farm. It was just a picture that really shows some of the drawbacks of tillage. But as organic farmers, whether you're vegetable growers are even worse, but even grain growers tend to till the ground a lot. And so I started thinking about all of the problems that we have with tillage and how can we incorporate some of the great things that are happening in conventional agriculture with conventional no-till into organic systems. So that's how I came into managing cover crops differently, the way we're going to talk about today. Because not only do you have to plow the ground and then do you do the secondary tillages, then you come through and you have all kinds of cultivation to manage weeds. So it's labor intensive from an organic perspective because we can't spray, so we're in there cultivating weeds trying to keep them out. And we can do a good job, as you can see. I mean, it's certainly doable, but not without a great deal of effort. And then I'm a slow learner, so it takes me a while to catch on. But one day, I'm sort of thinking about how are we going to encourage. In fact, I was in Maryland and I had given a brief talk, and there was a group of farmers sitting in the back right up against the wall, much like this, and they were very polite and listened to me talk. And then at the end they said, okay, us 5 guys, we farm about 7,000 acres. How the heck are we, and they didn't say heck, but how the heck are we going to cultivate all that ground? We don't have time. We don't have labor. It's just not possible. So even if we did like your idea of organic, too much tillage, we parked the plow, and our CS told us to park the plow 10 years ago, and we did. So we don't have plows. We don't have cultivators. We don't have time. How are we going to do this? And so I started thinking about how we can incorporate no-till into organic agriculture. And then one day, of course, standing, which happens so often, the good ideas come when you're standing right next to them and they're staring you in the face. We know, and we learned a long time ago, that we can mulch out annual weeds in a garden. Anybody garden, put mulch out in the garden? Yeah, of course, it's simple. But if I told you to go out and mulch 1,000 acres of soybeans, you go, well, okay, he might be a nice guy, but he's not too bright. It's just not going to happen. But if we can grow the mulch right in the field and terminate it mechanically, now we have a different scenario. Now everything becomes possible. So what we decided to do was create a roller that we could put on the front of the tractor, which frees up the back of the tractor for a grain drill, a planter, a transplanter, anything you want to chuck on the back there to get your seeds or transplants in the ground. And now we have a system that's not only biologically practical, but mechanically practical. Now we can do 1,000 acres if that's what we choose to do. And I think you can see that if you have a mulch like this, you're going to suppress annual weeds. Those of you who said you mulch your garden, if you put straw on, like an inch thick, it looks good for a few days. It'll impress the neighbors. But 2 weeks later, the weeds start coming through it. You've got to have a fair amount of biomass there. Before we had designed that roller crimper, we tried a bunch of different tools, kind of off-the-shelf materials. So you can see Steve Gross. We have a Buffalo rolling stock chopper there. And I tried that, and it's too aggressive for an organic system. It's a little hard to tell here in this photo, but these blades create some bare ground. Everybody knows that if the soil can see the sun, the plants can too, and the weeds germinate and away it goes. We tried some tillage equipment that have rollers in, like this Colden mulcher here. That didn't work very well. We tried mowers of all types, flail mowers, rotary mowers, sickle bar mowers, everything we could to mow the cover crop. You could kill the cover crop with a mower. The problem is almost every mower that we tried, we couldn't find anything that didn't in some way, shape, or form gather the mulch, move it around, shift it, and not deposit it exactly where it had picked it up. So again, you had some bare spots. The other problem we had, of course, is once you mow it, now your planter, it might still say corn planter on the side, but it's really a hay rake. I tell everybody the only reason you can comb the hair on your head is because it's attached. If it wasn't attached, the comb wouldn't work very well. I don't have that problem, but so we decided to make a tool specifically designed for this. We designed our roller crimper here to have this chevron pattern. Many of you have seen pictures of it or maybe even worked with one in the past, I don't know. Ours is designed so that we could fill it with water so we could manage the weight. I mean, here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take this tool and we're trying to crush the stems of this cover crop by pinching it between an anvil, which is the soil, and the blade. So the blade rolls across the surface of the soil, pinching the cover crop in between and crimping the stem. It's not chopping it, it's not cutting it, it's still intact, it's just crushed. As long as the cover crop that you're working with, and it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's an annual or a winter annual, It could be any grass like wheat, triticale, oats, spelt, barley, rye. It could be a legume like crimson clover, this one, hairy vetch, Austrian winter peas, field peas, buckwheat. Any of those crops, once they've flowered and they're sexually mature, they're easy to kill. If you leave them alone, they would die anyway. You're just going to terminate them a little bit earlier. And here's how it works in practice. Because, again, I'm an organic farmer. This was an alfalfa field. I didn't put that on here, but this is not a research plot. This was just two fields came together on our research station, and I took the picture. Because it's organic, I had to plow it. Because it was alfalfa, couldn't kill it any other way. It's a perennial. Then I disked it, and then I cultipacked it, so I got a good seed bed. I planted it. I rotary hoed it twice for early weed control. I cultivated it twice for late weed control, and I came back and harvested it, and that's kind of standard practice for us on plowed ground. And I happened to get 143 bushels of corn. Over here, I had a field of hairy vetch, which is a winter annual. I put the roller on the front of the tractor, the planter on the back of the tractor. It was one pass to get the crop in the ground, came back and harvested it. Didn't do anything else in between, no fertilizer, no weed control, nothing, and I got 160 bushel of corn. I said earlier today, I showed this slide to a group of people who were mostly economists, and one guy yelled out from the back room, "Yeah, but can you prove you saved money?" I'm like, well, no, it's not research plots. I didn't collect data on that, but, and even if the yield was exactly the same, I saved money. But the reality is most farmers that get the system in place and become comfortable with it have found that their yields are higher than where they plow, their weeds are less, and it's less work.
Was this with the legumes or the
This is all legumes. This was hairy vetch and this was alfalfa. It's all legumes. Again, just to reiterate what Steve said, to be in a successful cover crop program, you have to make cover crops the most important crop you grow. And that's counterintuitive to farmers. They go, oh, no, I'm a corn farmer, or I'm a tomato grower, or whatever it is. You know, I grow pumpkins. It's like, yeah, that's what you sell. But if your goal is to produce healthy soil and healthy people, then the crop is somewhat irrelevant, and you're concentrating on cover crops. And what the reality is, it's like, you know, it's in life. When you give stuff away, you get more back. Anybody ever notice that? You know, it's not like the more you keep, the more you get. It's like the more you give away, the more you get. And the more I concentrate on cover crops, the better my cash crops do. That's not my intention, but that's just what happens. I don't know. Other farmers have said they see the same thing. Just put this in here to say, you know, if you're going to mulch your field, you got to have a lot of mulch. You know, we used to be in a 5,000 to 6,000 pound dry matter per acre range, and now we're up in the 9,000 to 11,000 pounds. We're getting better at growing our cover crops, and we depend on that thick mulch to get the job done. Right now, because the roller seems to be working pretty well uniformly wherever I go in the world, the problem seems to be on the planter side. And so we're working a lot on trying to manage the planter and redesign the planter so that we can get through these heavy mulches as best we can. Just a picture here. I mean, seeds laying on the ground here are not going to grow. They're just, it's wasted seed. You got to get it in this slit, which means I got to cut through this mulch and get the seed in the ground. We're playing around with some other tools. We have some shark tooth residue managers we played with a little bit. I just put a set of Peckway planter residue slicers on my Monosem planter to try to cut through that mulch a little bit better. The theory behind this tool is if you take a piece of paper and hold it in your hand, in one hand, and try to cut it with a knife with your other hand, no matter how sharp the knife is, it's not going to cut it. But if I come along and hold the other end of the paper, now you can slice right through it. So what we're doing here is we're grabbing a hold of both sides with these wheels, pressing it to the ground, and using this sharp knife, this coulter, to slice right through it. Just pinning it to the ground and slicing through it. Once I get the cover crop sliced, the planter goes right into it, no problem. We up our seeding rate a little bit, mainly because not every seed is going to get in the ground, and even those that do get in the ground are in a little bit of an adverse environment. They got to push up through that mulch. Just go through some slides real quick here. Cornfield planted. That's an organic cornfield already planted. Here it is a few weeks later. Corn's up out of the ground. Here it is kind of mid-season-ish, you know, corn's up, mulch is on the ground, growing nice. This was a different field, but it was 2013. That's Dr. Gladys Zanotti, works with me at Rodale, holding up some mulch, and you can see we do have some weeds that have broken through, but that's not yield limiting in any way, shape, or form. Works on corn, works on soybeans. You just have to match the cover crop up to the cash crop. People always say, well, what's the best cover crop to use? It's a little like, anybody ever buy an article of clothing where it said one size fits all? Yeah, how can that be? It should say one size fits nobody. I can't give you an exact recipe and say this is the best thing to do no matter where you are in the country or the world. It wouldn't work that way. But matching the cover crop up to the cash crop, I think, is really critical. We've had a lot of questions by farmers. They'll look at the system and they'll go, okay, you've got this much biomass on the ground. That's what you need to manage weeds. But man, I've got animals. I could feed that, or I could use it for bedding, or I could sell that. What happens if I chop that off and get rid of it? So over here you can see we're rolling it. Here we cut it and we baled it. This was in 2012. A fairly large-scale research project. I just picked out 3 select slides to show you here. Here's where we cut it and baled it. We planted the soybeans. They came up great, but I can't spray herbicide, and so the weeds came up great too. And how the combine found 17 bushels to the acre in there is beyond me, but it did. Some of you are researchers, and I know you are, and researchers are kind of fun. Gladys Zanotti is going, I want rows 4, 5, and 6. Okay, you point to them, I'll harvest them, but I couldn't find them. The next 2 slides are really interesting because they point out some of the questions that we have with the system. Why does it work? Why doesn't it work? This happened to be treatment 11, not that that matters. It was planted on June 1st. I had those shark teeth residue managers on that you saw earlier, those Yetter tools. And we rolled, this was what the crop looked like when we rolled it. Here's what the beans looked like when they came up, not half bad. We did get some weeds, late season foxtail breaking through. I got 38 bushels to the acre. June 1st. I planted 7 days earlier. So it was the exact same treatment with the shark teeth. Everything was the same. 59 bushels. Why did I get 20 bushels more planting a week earlier? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. If I knew, I would be probably wealthy because soybeans that year were $30 a bushel. $600 an acre. Difference for planting a week earlier. There's a lot of research that still needs to be done. We don't have all the answers by a long shot, but we know the system can work. Some of Dr. Kern's work here, sitting in the front row. The important thing to note is, you got to get your cover crop in on time. Again, as Steve said, treat it like your cash crop. You wouldn't plant your cash crop 2 months late and expect to get a full yield. You can't do that with cover crops either. Here's rye planted on August 25th. Here it is October 15th. All these pictures were taken on April 1st. Is this cover crop going to work? If you planted it October 15th, you go, oh, this system doesn't work. It's like, well, the system works. You don't. You goofed up. Any weeds that, again, some of Dr. Kern's work here, any weeds that have germinated and are already in place, the roller's not going to kill them. Again, it's not a magic tool. So here you can see we've got some ragweed that's already germinated in rye. When you roll the rye, it just says thank you because now its canopy is gone and it's got sunshine and fresh air and it's going to grow. The roller won't, again, it might give it a bad day, but it won't kill it. If it works in corn and beans, it can work in tomatoes, it can work in pumpkins. This is a farmer on Long Island who rolls sorghum Sudan grass, plants it early, the sorghum early in the spring, rolls it down, sprays it with, I guess, Roundup, I don't know what he uses, and that's his pumpkin field. It's beautiful. Can work with grain drills, can work with horse farmers. It doesn't matter what you're doing. This is a roller we designed for raised bed vegetable production. Again, that's just a little bit of ingenuity. Why not? We just created these drums on the side. And I use the term we rather loosely. Jake Blank, the manufacturer, really has been inspirational in some of these activities. And he said, well, what if we put a pipe on there and made it so it flexed? I'm like, hey, sounds like a plan to me. And that's what he did.
Those steel tires there help too.
Those steel wheels don't hurt. Yeah, that's James Weaver. He's a market grower. He grows heirloom tomatoes and hot peppers. Do you know James Weaver? Okay. Well, last year he sold close to $250,000 of heirloom tomatoes in little boxes to, yeah. It's scale neutral because it's based on biology. So it doesn't matter whether this is Vaughn Jackson's operation in Illinois. I don't know him, but he sent me some pictures. I understand he's not organic. He's just doing it because it makes sense. This is a woman sent me a picture. She's actually in a greenhouse. She was from Vermont, and she said, well, your roller is really a flat plate that you chose to, if you take a piece of paper and roll it into a tube, now it's a tube. Well, I unrolled it. And she said, I looked for the smallest flat plate I could find on my farm, and it was a piece of 2x4. And then on the bottom of that, she said I didn't have any angle iron or any metalworking skills, so she found a unloading apron chain from a manure spreader, and she took one of the crossbars and screwed it to the bottom. Took 2 pieces of wash line rope, put them in the ends for handles. You can sort of see them in her hands there. Put your foot on it, and you are the crimping machine, or she is the crimping machine. Hand crimped this floor inside the greenhouse, hand transplanted tomatoes. She said no soil-borne diseases from water splashing up off the soil. Didn't have to fertilize it. It was a legume. Didn't have to weed it. It was perfect. Why not? It can work. Doesn't preclude you from using other technologies like spraying Roundup if you want to. So if you can imagine, these are, God forbid, Roundup-ready soybeans, only because I'm an organic farmer. I have to say that. So these are Roundup-ready soybeans, and you get some weeds breaking through. You can still spray your Roundup if you like it. You know, it doesn't hurt anything. But if you have this much control without any herbicides, you're making money. That's more money for you. So it doesn't preclude other activities. If you like cultivating, there's high residue cultivators that'll go through that mess too. Pick up any escaped weeds or perennial weeds that get through there. And I'll end with that. Thank you.